Hey guys, welcome to Mix in America. I got a special guest with me today. I'm going to jump right in it. Terrance Reeves-Chong, pastor at Freedom Church here in Minnesota. First of all, let me just introduce you. Say, hey, what's up? Thanks for joining me, Terrance.
Yeah. Thank you so much, man. Thanks for having me. This means a lot that I could be on the show, the podcast, man. Thank you so much. I'm excited, man. This is great.
Yeah, so obviously we talk about race. I've known you for a while. I feel like we're fairly close friends, and we've had a lot of conversations about some pretty decently deep stuff about faith, about life. But I don't know if we've ever really had conversations about race before. So I'm interested to get into this with you. Can you maybe just kind of tell me your story a little bit? What is your background? Where are you from? I know you're not originally from Minnesota here.
Yeah, man, absolutely. It's funny actually to comment on that. I think the deepest conversations, the deepest that we've had, have always been in like passing. Like I think we've had like great conversations about like football and stuff, but then we'll be like, I remember once we were like setting up for a camera and it was like, hey, we got super deep. And then one at a wedding, it was like, hey, what's up, man? And we got super deep, you know? And we've always been like, man, it'd be great if we sat down and got deep. So yeah, that's why I was so excited for this, man, because we've had some great conversations. But yeah, man, yeah. So, I think the question was like, what brought me up here to Minnesota, right? Is that what you said? So I had actually just gotten saved at my church in Waynesville, Missouri, which was kind of a radical experience. I got to my senior year and I was going to enlist in the Marines. I was going to get married and all that stuff just went out the window, man, because I got, found Jesus, right? And so it changed my life. He changed my life. And this internship came through. They did some services. They were crazy. They actually were athletic. This was actually what like kind of got me excited about being a Christian is because I thought being a Christian meant that you had to be like super lame, just to be honest with you. I was like, okay, if you're a Christian, you can't do anything cool. Like, no being cool, no talking to ladies. Like it's just all, just lame stuff from here on out, right? So these dudes came through my church and they were like jamming on people. Like they were like behind the back dunks and, taking charges like pros, and so I was like, I could be a Christian, right? And so it was funny though. I encountered God. And so those guys were from Minnesota. I joined that internship, came to Minnesota, and that's what brought me up here. So I've been here from, since 2005 now. So 15 years. This is my home now. So yeah, man, that's how I got to Minnesota.
Yeah. So how has race impacted your story? You said you're from Missouri, right? So I don't know if in your town growing up, race was different. You are of mixed race. What is your experience growing up? How has race shaped your experience of life?
Yeah, man, I would say in a dramatic way because I grew up in Missouri. So, historically, even speaking, it's a split state as far as Civil War goes. So you had kind of some north, some south, and so we definitely fell on the southern side of that. But racism definitely was alive and well where I came from. We were the only Black family in the community. It was a small town. Actually, there was a couple of others that moved in later on. But we were for sure, we were the Black family, right? And so race really affected my outlook on life because it was definitely something that was acknowledged and emphasized to me often, right? Like, because I was the Black kid, like, being an all-white community, you're the Black guy. And, I think a lot of pressure comes with that. I didn't experience a lot of racism up front. But as I went on, I would encounter it in shocking ways. Like I dated this girl and I was like, man, she's so cute. Everybody's like, oh, Terrance, like, though they call me Terry back then, right? They're like, Terry, you dog, like she's so hot, oh, you're so lucky. But then her parents were like, hey, you're not dating a nigger. And I was like, whoa, like, and I was like, oh, that's right. I'm different, And so they hit me with that. And I remember I was like, I can't believe they just said that. You know what I mean? And so she had to break up with me. And it was like little moments like that where it was kind of like, hey, you're one of us, but you're not. Yeah. And so that, you kind of grow up with, for me, I grew up with kind of a duality feeling of race. On one hand, because I grew up in an all white culture that it was occasionally, it was known because of the Black kid and you can't date this girl and you can't talk to that guy and you got to fight with this guy because he's racist. And so on one hand, I grew up kind of resenting my Blackness. which is sad because I just want to be a kid. I just want to be normal. But then on the other side of my family, because I have a great family, I was proud of my blackness. So kind of reconciling this, like I'd be so mad at the fact that it was like I just want to be normal, you know. But then on
Yeah.
the other hand, I was very proud of being a black man, you know what I mean? So like my heritage is rich. I'm not ashamed of it, but it was definitely difficult growing up like that and having to struggle with that, you know.
Were you, because you're not
So
full black,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is actually kind of an interesting thing here, and I haven't told a lot of people this, but I grew up, you know, I'm black and Asian, right? Terrance Reeves-Chong is my name, so black and Asian. So I kind of had that, you know, I didn't really run into a lot of Asian people. So as far as my Asian heritage went, it wasn't really necessarily enforced through my family or culturally. So, you know, I just kind of had I don't know, I was just like the Asian card. That's what I call it. It was like I was Asian. So Chinese New
Yeah.
Year rolled around. I was like, hey, I'm Asian. That's me, right? You know, I'll take two,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it was like I was Asian and black. But then kind of growing up, I mean, it's a long story. I actually found out 2 years ago that I'm not Asian. I'm actually white. I'm black and white.
Really?
And that's a long story, long story for another episode. But so all the Asian jokes that I've made, I'm sorry. I thought, you know, I was like, how can I be racist? I'm Asian, right? And I would say things that probably only Asian people can say, but I'm not Asian. So
Interesting.
I take that back. I'm gonna keep my name because it's mine. Yeah. Very interesting, man. Very interesting.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what about coming up to Minnesota? Was there a difference in the way race was seen and the way you were seen? You know, where you live in Minnesota, was it more diverse? Was it less diverse? Was it, you know, we that grew up in Minnesota think of the North kind of as less racist.
Yeah.
Was that your experience at all?
Yep. Yeah. No, it was crazy. Well, okay, so all my life growing up in Missouri, I grew up in a small town until I went to high school, and it was a very diverse high school. And so I grew up with a lot of diversity in high school. But then the trickiest thing about that is you know, fitting in. Like you know, a lot of people would tell me I didn't act black enough, right? So I'd be like, I would be hanging out with some guys, you know, just kind of being me, really trying to find that racial identity, right? Like, okay, so now as a black man, I'm going to hang out with black people, and I would say things and they'd be like, that was the whitest thing you've ever said. And I was like, well, how's it white? Like, that's me, right? And so the struggle of even trying to find out like how can I just be how can I be me? Like, how can I be accepted and find that identity in race was very difficult, very difficult. But I was used to more diversity. You know, I definitely, you know, there was a kid once on the playground in my other school when growing up, and he said something racist, and I fight him, and everybody kind of stood there and watched. Well, in the new school, in my high school, if anybody would say anything racist, like you didn't have to fight. Like you had like a whole crew like of black people that didn't tolerate racism. So you didn't really have a lot of overtly racist people in my high school because it was so diverse that, you know, I mean, you definitely if you were going to say anything racist, it was like all out war, you know what I mean? And so I didn't really have a lot of that. I didn't feel like I was the only black guy, right? So I just kind of got to be me and establish what that meant. So yeah, coming up to Minnesota, it was definitely more diverse. I would say I found it was, you know, when I went out, it was like, oh, there's black people, there's all kinds of ethnicities. So that was really refreshing. I think until I got into Bible school, it was kind of like the small town all over again, where it was kind of like, oh, it's me and this guy, right? Like it was like there were like two black people. And so coming back into the church actually was kind of like going back to not my high school past, but my like elementary growing up, middle school past, right? Because it was like everybody's white again, right?
Yeah.
And it actually, it's funny, Josh, too, because people would be like, well, there are black people here, but they were like straight from Nigeria. And there's a big difference between like African and African American. And I was like, listen, I know that we're black, but I don't think we're connecting on the same things here, you know? So I kind of felt like it was, you know, definitely that again, coming into the church, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a big thing that I think white people don't understand is that cultural heritage is one thing. Like just because somebody has darker skin doesn't mean that we culturally identify with each other or that we necessarily have anything in common. because there is, and Brooklyn Park does have a pretty large like African population. This is obviously African American too, and Asian. Brooklyn Park's pretty diverse, but growing up kind of in this area, African is different than Black, and it's not like a big deal, and it's still diverse. But I think white people just don't even really understand that there is a difference.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
I do. I know what you're saying a lot, because I think even in times where, I had voiced in just certain circles, I remember once in Bible school, a girl was like, just straight up said in front of everybody, like it was normal, like, oh, I would never date a Black guy. And I remember thinking, I was like, man, that was the most hurtful thing. Like, because I actually kind of had a crush on her, and it was like, mwah, like, so when she said that, I was like, not only are my chances crushed, I don't know if I like you anymore, right? And she kind of went on to explain, like, oh, listen, my family would never accept if I dated a Black guy. I mean, you know what I mean, right? And some of the other, like, people in the Bible school, and this is crazy because now this is like Bible school, we're all Christians, so this is like this is a shocker to me, because I'm like, oh, I thought racism died now that we all love Jesus, right? And so it was funny because me and the Black guy, his, I won't say his name, but me and him, like, we were friends, and he was like the only other Black guy, and we were like, what? I was like, thank you that somebody else realized how racist that was, and so we talked to her after we teased her for a little bit, and she was like, oh my God, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, but yeah, it was funny because people were like, she's not racist, don't worry. But now that I've kind of learned a little bit more about this, it's like, that is racism. I think a lot of people have defined racism as hating Black people, but racism isn't hating Black people. If that's the definition of racism, then anybody gets the I'm not racist card because I don't hate Black people. But just the simple statement that, like, oh no, I would never date a Black guy, that is racist. And I think we've got to change that definition, a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a lot you said in there that I kind of want to unpack a little bit. But what you were just talking about people can not be racist, but say racist things. So that might have been the case with that. And I think people have a hard time telling the difference between that and separating that. Then I have a story of, I'm not going to tell the whole story. I think I've told it before on the podcast, but I had a girl in college that I liked, and she told me that she couldn't date me because she could never take me home to her parents back in Texas. And that was kind of a moment, like a reminder of that kind of stuff. So like I didn't expect that at all. And she was from a small town in Texas. So like I kind of justified it as like, oh, they're still racist over there. But obviously it's not secluded to the South.
No.
And then the other thing was I got asked this a lot in college when people found out I was mixed. They asked, do you like Black girls or white girls? Did you ever get that question? I thought that was the weirdest thing ever. I thought that was so weird.
All the time, dude. Or like in the church, and even at, like, just the white communities I was a part of, there'd be like a Black girl that would just come and visit, and they'd be like, oh, Terrance, she's Black. And I'm like, y'all, I don't even know her. Like, you think it's just like, what are you thinking that Black people are? Like, we're like, oh, one of my kind, yay. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, dude, I got that question all the time.
Yeah, which is just ridiculous. But I do want to talk about, so you mentioned the deep conversation we had at a wedding just a couple months ago. I want to talk about that because honestly, this is one of the reasons why I for sure wanted to do season 2 of Mix America, because I wanted to have this conversation with you. You told me a story about you recently found out some of your family history. Can you tell me that story and explain what you found out?
Yeah, man, absolutely. It's crazy because 2020 for me was a rediscovery year. And it's crazy because, like, on the surface, if I were to tell myself the facts of 2020 maybe like 5 years ago, it would have seemed it would be like a story of loss, right? But in actuality, it was honestly a beautiful story for me of rediscovery and really freedom. And so one of the things that I discovered in 2020 was that my great grandpa, we called him Opa, And that's a long story too. I call them Opas, German, right? And so we call them Opa, and great man. My grandpa, a great man, hard worker. And so actually, I mean, this is probably like how long ago was this? I mean, Josh, because I told you that was fresh. Like when I told you that, man, that had to be what, like July or
No, it
June?
was, I don't know, it was Kaylee's
Oh,
wedding.
was it? No, no, no. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh-oh. If she watches this, she's gonna be
Uh-oh.
like, say what?
You're supposed to know. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I do know,
Um,
but I'm gonna skip those details. I do
yeah.
know,
Okay.
but I'll skip that. Yeah. But
It
no,
wasn't that
so
long
it
ago.
wasn't that long ago. No, it wasn't that long ago. I mean,
Yeah.
so I discovered that my Opa actually they had owned a farm in Oklahoma. And so what happened was he had about, I think it was like 500 acres, and some men from the town, they were white men, approached him and said, hey, so this is my great grandpa. They said, hey, we want to buy your land. And he was like, no, I'm not selling my land. Like, we got this. And that was a long story too. I mean, but they earned it, they got it. And so what happened was, um, the men, some of them were police officers and others were just part of the town. They wanted to buy the land. And so what happened was they ended up burning the house down with his wife and kids locked inside, and ran them out of town. And so they died. And so they took the land. And so my Opa had to escape to Arkansas, I believe, where he became a sharecropper. And he actually got himself in so much debt just because he had nothing. So he was at the mercy of whoever could hire him at whatever contract. And so so he worked that and got a lot of debt. Then moved, because he was in so much debt, he had to escape to St. Louis, which is where he kind of lived the rest of his life. And he so at the end of his life, he kind of had, the only thing he had to show for it really was like this house that had debt on it, and some other things. He raised great children. He raised monetarily. That's the only thing he had to show for it. But inheritance wise, he imparted a lot of tenacity, a lot of hard work ethic, a can-do attitude. Don't ever quit attitude, which really helped my grandpa be the man that he was. But the reason why this story was so significant to me is because I had seen a lot of my family members struggle financially. I saw a lot of them have, like my grandpa, he had to start from scratch, and even his struggles that he had, and he's doing very well now. But my wife, who is white, has an equal story. She has a similar story about her great grandparents owning land, and then they used that land, they paid it off debt free, and then they passed it down to my father-in-law now. And he owns the land with his siblings, and then they're using that land to build up a financial legacy for their family. And the story of provision and providing a way for their family to go to school and follow their dreams, on contrast to my family, who had the same amount of land. They actually had more land. And our story wasn't a story of legacy, it was a story of reset. So when their family kept going higher and higher and higher, to this day, they have an inheritance that is setting them up, a debt-free land, debt-free house. I mean, so people can do what they want to do. My family had to start from the bottom, where their family started way up here, economically
Yeah.
speaking. And so the impact on two generations, I got to actually see the contrast, because that's not the case for our family. If there's any financial legacy that's going to be handed down, it's actually going to have to be a first generation one, as opposed to my wife, who was able to keep the land because they were white, and my family lost the land because they were black. And so that was a painful lesson to hear and to learn for my family, but one I'm grateful for because what it's done in me today.
Yeah, did we talked about at the time, but I don't know if you ever looked up, or if there's a way to look up if that had something to do with the race massacre in Tulsa back at I don't know if it was around the same time or not,
Yeah,
but
you know what? I didn't get to dig into it too much and look at the timelines. I actually have some family members that were going to share more with me, but it's there's a reason why I just learned about this recently, because it's such a tender moment. One thing I've learned with our family culture, and I've seen it in other, Black culture, is we're a very proud people. And so we don't necessarily talk about like the resets or the
Yeah.
pain or the trauma, but we talk about, how to move forward and how to build and rebuild. Like my family, even growing up in a small town where we experienced racism, our mentality was, you don't ever let anybody set you back. Like, you don't ever
Yeah.
let anybody hold you down for your dreams, no matter where you come from or what they say. You outwork, you outperform, you be the best that you can be. And then when you're on top, you show generosity and love. You
Yeah.
show acceptance and tolerance. You make the culture that you want to be a part of to all of them, even the haters. And so for us, we never really talked about the past, even though it's such a rich inheritance to me. But we always talked about like how to move forward, as a people. So yeah,
Yeah.
man, I'm going to look into that though, because that's definitely interesting.
No, I don't know exactly how you look it up. I guess maybe to see what the year is or whatever, but that's
Yeah,
important.
yeah.
That's another example, because those massacres in Tulsa, like I went to school in Tulsa, never heard about them. It wasn't until the last
Dang.
really few years that stuff's kind of come to light.
Wow.
And even now there's talks about like the official thing is like that there was like a couple hundred that died, but like they say it could have been like thousands. So many people that were killed because they were Black and successful. In the early part of the 1900s. And I think stories like that are important because it's not everyone's story. Not every Black person in America had to.
Right.
I've talked about it on this podcast before. My mom's parents were actually pretty well set up. My grandpa earned a doctorate, sent their kids to Catholic school. My mom was actually better set up than my dad was as far as financial success in life. But stories like that remind me, and should be a reminder to people, that there was stuff like that. Like, besides the fact that, okay, when slaves were freed, it's not like they gave them the 40 acres and a mule or anything. Like they had nothing. So that already building generational wealth was hard. And then when you have stories like the Tulsa massacre, or like your great grandfather that did build the life for themselves, and then they had it taken away, that wasn't that long ago. And so that story and comparing to your wife's family, not that they have anything to apologize for, but you see that example of like generational wealth. Like, how do you accrue generational wealth when that's taken from you like that? And not that I have like answers that we can fix it, but I love what you said about that. Makes me stronger. Like, I hear stuff like that and want my family to overcome.
Yeah.
And it encourages me that I can overcome anything. Right.
Yep. Right. Yeah, man. I love how you said that, because that's exactly where I'm at. I just had to come to terms with the inheritance that I have is in internal, and it's the lessons of pick yourself back up if you fall, or if somebody throws you down. I mean, regardless of why you're in the pit, whether you got there yourself or somebody threw you in, get out, get up, dust yourself off, and dream again, live again. And even if for me, I want to give my kids an inheritance. So I'm going to build that. Like, I'm going to build that however God leads me and inspires me to do that. And I'm going to get to work, and I'm willing to work hard for it, not in spite of what was done to my family, or even me in my life, but I'm going to do that to create the future that I want to see. And I think that for me, it keeps me out of that a trap of being a victim. Like, I never got ahead because of this, or I never was able to give an inheritance because of that or them. It's like, no, like I'm gonna reject victim mentality, and how do you do that? You create. So I'm gonna be a creator. I'm gonna create the life that I want to see. I want to create financial freedom, and so that's the kind of lesson I took from that, is like, we can do it. My family did it, my opa did it, my grandpa did it, and by the grace of God, I'm going to do it too.
Yeah, no, and that's good. That's tough. Not a lot of people have that understanding, where it's like, even if something happened to you, like you said, I love what you said about it. Even if it's not your fault, you're in the pit, somebody threw you in there, you still got to get out. And even though it's harder, you still you still want to overcome. Like, you can't let that defeat you. And I love that your great grandpa didn't let that defeat him, and he still left a legacy for his family, even if it wasn't financial at that point. You talked about this last year being a year of of what I don't know what you call it, discovery, right? It was the year of discovery. This last year has been 2020 had been, it was crazy. Not that the calendar flipped and everything's perfect now, but walk me maybe through a little bit of that last year. We don't need to go into details about anybody that might still be upset or whatever, but 2020, you were as close to Savan, as any of us. So losing Sav and then starting your own church right before the pandemic hit, and then George Floyd, and I don't know if there's any discovery for racial, if that helped spark some things for you, but just I guess talk about this year and how has it affected just you, and then the way you've seen race maybe in America right now.
Woo. All right. Yeah. So this goes, it's a 2-hour long podcast, right? 2 hour long. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, man, there's a lot, man. And I heard a quote just today, actually, from a pastor out west. And he said, trauma happens when you walk through pain alone. And I thought, dude, that's crazy, because I got to first say, like, I walked through a lot in 2020, and I'm thankful for the people that helped me walk through it. There were so many people that helped me and helped me process so that I could come out of the pain and from some of these experiences that you're saying, and even I say trauma, but yeah, I guess I could say that, because even finding out I'm not Chinese. I mean, that's crazy. I grew up every year, like, celebrating and being like, yeah, I'm Chinese, but there was a lesson in that too. And so I said it before, but my biggest banner moving forward was, I refuse to be a victim. I'm going to be a creator. I'm going to create the life that God has shown me on the inside. But yeah, man, 2020 was crazy. Starting a church in the middle of a global pandemic, losing friendships that I thought were solid. George Floyd, our city being like turned upside down. I don't know if you have this, but this equally can be a point of pain. But like having people only reach out to you because you're Black, you know what I mean? Like, hey, it's Black History Month. Can you speak? It's like, oh, come on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like nothing. I don't think people understand how hurtful it is to only be embraced because of your Blackness and not because of your humanity. That can be a very hurtful thing, even when George Floyd happened, having people reach out to me, and say, hey, I care about you, but then never do anything. I learned a lot. It was a very hurtful experience. And during the pain, I kind of found myself at different crossroads and different like kind of points of rediscovery of like, okay, who am I going to be? Like, what am I going to do from all of this? It was a tough road. I think for me, I came to this conclusion that racism, even though it is an issue, it's not the root. The root is really evil. People treating human beings differently because of the color, or because of their background, and using their positions of power to oppress and not serve like Jesus modeled to us. It truly is an evil problem. It's an evil problem. And so for me, like discovering that I wasn't Chinese, I'll go to that for a second. Discover that I was actually white, and that story is epic in and of itself. So it really kind of solidified in me that race it can truly be a fickle thing, and even though I honor my heritage, I honor my history, I honor where I've come from and what my ancestors have done, I'm going to choose to put my identity in something higher than something skin deep. And that's the beauty of Christianity, right? Like, because the church, our message should be, come as you are, bring your culture, bring your race. Like, let's not pretend that it doesn't exist. Obviously, that's foolishness, because what I've seen happen is you can tie, how do I say this? You can tie your own cultural norms. You try to tie them into theological concepts. So then people start losing who they are, and and what they're about to things that aren't the word but are sold as the word, right? And so what we have to do as a church is we have to get our culture, we have to untie our culture from the word and let the word be the word and culture be the culture. And our message is, come as you are, be black, be white, be Chinese, be Hispanic, be who you are, and bring your culture. And then let's all together put that in the back seat of our lives and allow the word of God to be in the front seat, because we're all followers of the way. And so anything that we've learned culturally that goes against the way, we'll have a discussion around that. But we will identify with who we are in Christ, but still maintain our cultural background, still maintain our racial background. And for me, it was embracing, I am a black man, but I am God's son first in Christ. I've been grafted in to the kingdom of light first. That doesn't make me not black. I am proud to be black. I'm still kind of discovering what it means to be white and black. I don't know what that means yet, because that's a new discovery. Don't know if I'll even take the time to do it. But
Talk to me,
honestly,
I've been black and white my whole life, so come talk to me. We'll talk about it.
I will. We'll have to talk about that afterwards, because I'm like,
Yeah.
what does this mean, right? But yeah, man. So for me, it was solidifying, my identity as I'm God's man. I'm God's man and a black man, and you don't have to. Those two aren't in opposition, and that's something that we as a church, we have to be proud of. We have to celebrate our diversity, because that's truly where the strength of the church is when we don't back down from those conversations, maybe where a minority group feels marginalized or oppressed by the majority. We can't stray away from those conversations. So for me, man, I guess all in all, 2020 has taught me two things. It's taught me, it's refined who I am in Christ. It's taught me to love all the more. And it's also taught me that it takes courage to stand up against evil. And like the Bible says, like, people aren't our enemy. When the moment people become our enemy is the moment that we will do like a reverse oppression thing. The moment I get in power, I'm going to make sure that my enemy, the people, it's like, no. Like, people are not our enemy. People are our mission. And so, yeah, man, all people, the people in my past that have, wronged me, thrown me into a pit, maybe the people that have even shown racism towards me, I truly love those people. That's who I am. That's as a black man, as God's man, I love people. And yeah, man, that's kind of what I've emerged from 2020, out of all the pain and all the loss and all the crazy things, that have happened. I think it's those two things are really solidified, in my life,
Man, that's really good. That kind of answered my next question, was going to be kind of you answered a lot of stuff in there,
yeah.
but kind of what is the church's response? You're a pastor. What does the church need to do or not do during this time?
Yeah. I would say, honestly, my biggest thing that I've seen in the church is because you hear a lot of people say we got to talk about it, right? And so, like, I want to take that a step further, because, like, conversations aren't enough. They're not enough, because the oppression and the injustice that's happened, it happened. It actually happened, right?
Yeah.
Act, right? And so it took an act for it to actually happen. And so when the church's response is, well, we got to talk. Well, no. Like, if an act got us into oppression, then an act is going to get us out of oppression. If an act caused the injustice, then an act is going to bring justice. And so what we need to do is all these, yes, the conversation needs to happen, but the conversation needs to happen from the posture and the position of action, right? And so what I think the church needs to do is, as we approach these matters of race and injustice, and oppression, is we need to have the conversation from the posture of willing to be wrong and more willing to do what's right. And actually, let me add something to that. Willing to be wrong and more willing to pay the price to do what's right. Because the reality is, a lot of these things that have happened, there is a price to pay, a comfort to sacrifice in order to make wrongs right. And that's okay, because we follow the Savior who laid down his life and paid the price to make wrongs right. He brought grace with a high price. And so I think we need to talk, but I think in a lot of ways we need to stop talking and start acting and putting our money where our mouths is, putting our hands where our sermons are, and start acting this out. Because I think in a time where people have been devastated, now is the time where the church more than ever needs to be doing things, having conversations, apologizing, and making wrongs right. And it's going to mean some sacrifice. It's going to mean some people that maybe had the comfort from generational blessings. Maybe it means that you come down from that generational blessing and you make it right for people that you need to make it right for. I'm not going to prescribe what people need to do, but they just need to be willing to do something. Because I've seen people, I've seen, I personally, Josh, I'll tell you, I personally had times, people that reached out to me when George Floyd happened. And they were like, oh, Terrance, if there's anything we can do. Well, it's crazy because these same people back in the day when, I was in ministry, I remember encountering racism. I went to these people and said, hey, that made me feel really uncomfortable. This thing was said to me and it was racist, and the response was like, oh man, that sucks, or, oh man, I'll be praying for you. But then when George Floyd happened, they were on the front lines marching down Minneapolis. So for me, I feel like a lot of people want justice when it's popular. I think what we want is we want pop justice. When there's a t-shirt to buy and everybody's on board and I stand for George Floyd. Well, why don't you stop standing for the dead and start standing for the living? How about that? Because we always see a movement after somebody's died. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, they can't live their life anymore. Why don't you stand for the people that are alive today? And I'm not mad. Listen, everybody watching this, I'm not mad. I'm passionate. I'm passionate about the people that are still living their lives right now. It's going to take courage. It's going to take guts, but we have to do it. As a church, we have to do this.
Yeah.
I'm just passionate about it. I see a lot of movements happen after somebody's died. Most of these movements, bless them, like, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all these people that people are standing for. I get the stance. I get the outcry. But man, there are people alive today. There are people alive today. And I think we need to start talking about how do we stand for the living and what does that look like? Again, I remember being one of the only Black people, on staff, at a ministry. And I remember it was said to me, it was in jest, but I remember it was like, hey, we're so glad you're here. And we were all joking, right? But I'll never forget this moment because they were like, because you're Black and Asian and you kind of look like you could be like Hispanic or Israeli, you cover all races for us. So when it comes to affirmative action, all this stuff, we're good. And I was laughing and they were laughing, but I always remember thinking I'm the only one that's not white though. And all of you guys, all my bosses, you're all white. And so can I say to my boss at that point, actually, that's offensive. And I'm hurt by that because I don't think I ever would have. I don't think I could have gone higher. I think I would have been viewed as a threat. So at what point do you say hey, actually, I don't like that. I don't like that. It makes me feel like I'm only here because I'm Black and I'm not a man. Right. And so, I think what we have to do is we have to start having conversations about that. And I think we need to together as Christ followers begin to talk about how can we make wrongs right? How do we do that? How do we make sure that people feel like they have a seat at the table? Just another example. My mom actually, she told me this. There was somebody who came in to the place that she works and they were like, oh man, that guy just, I just got Jewed by that guy. And she was like, Jewed? And she was like, yeah, I got screwed over, that's Jewed. And she was like, listen, if anybody ever, she just went off. And when my mom goes off, she gets quiet. That's the crazy thing about my mom. She doesn't get loud. She got really quiet. She's like, if I hear anybody say Jude in this place ever again, I'm going to come unglued. That is wrong and unacceptable. Well, they're most likely not going to hire her for any executive level of leadership. And it was an executive that said that. It was a leader that said that, right, in the company. Mm-hmm. And so who's going to invite her to the table? Right? Yeah. Because if she'll stand for injustice on the showroom floor of their company, then she's not going to stand for it in the boardroom or at the
Yeah.
table. So now she's become a threat. And see, that to me, that's concerning, because how many more minorities or Black people feel that way, that they can't have a seat I know a lot of them. I've had a lot of conversations
Yeah.
that if they are vocal about injustice, then they become a threat, because legally now you're a threat. So we'll pacify you and we'll do whatever we need to do to keep you, because we legally need you, because you're Black, not because you're a great worker. But, you know, we're going to keep you here. We got to have more conversations about that, and we got to do something about it. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, I'll step down off my soapbox, but I'm passionate.
No, that was great. No, I appreciate that. I think it's tough to kind of find that balance of like, I don't want to be the guy that's always like calling everything racist. I don't want to be that guy that's always like making a bigger deal about stuff than it really is. But if you don't call someone on it, it's going to continue. And we talked about like the difference between saying something offensive and actually being racist. Sometimes, I don't know. I think that's a tough balance to find. Like, when am I going to call you on it, and when is it maybe not a big deal? And maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe it should be like, we need to call people on it every time and stop looking the other way. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the pain is so deep that I think we should err on the side of communication. Like, when I think calling it out needs to look like calling it out with the commitment to one another. Because in the church, we have a bad habit of just dropping people, right? Like, oh, done, right? And we're family, right? Isn't this the family of God? I mean, it's like the equivalent of somebody coming to the dinner table, you going home, you know, being like, Dad, I disagree. And he's like, well, I got news for you. You're not a part of the family anymore, Josh. I'm sorry, man, you're out. It's like, wait, we're family. That's ridiculous. So I think we have to have a foundation of commitment no matter what. And then once we can have that feeling of like, I won't be kicked out of my family or let go, so therefore I can have a conversation about anything that's made me feel uncomfortable, then I think what we can do is begin to unpack the ridiculous things like, you know, I went in line, you serve somebody first. That's so racist. It's like, let's not just throw the racism card at every single thing that makes us feel uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Like, then we can have the conversation of what truly is wrong and what truly is maybe ignorance, or maybe nothing at all. Maybe nothing at all. Maybe it's just like, you know, miscommunication. But we've got to commit. I think a lot of people walk on eggshells because they're like, if I call that out, then I'm going to cause controversy, and controversy is going to, you know, and that's the problem is, you know, it's we got to have this foundation of trust of like, you won't reject me if I say something that's going to cause some ripples, but we're people, and your soul matters, your heart matters. So yeah, man, I feel you on that though.
Yeah, I think the church, actually, one of the podcasts I did with Pastor Vince Freeman, he's a pastor in San Diego, friend of mine, talked about how the church should do grace better than anyone. Like, the world has cancel culture because they don't understand grace, but we as Christians should know better.
I mean, Jesus says this: perfect love casts out all fear, and he gives us unmerited grace. So really, the church should be the best at having very difficult conversations. And here's what I think. I think that if somebody is willing to have the conversation, and they're willing to have the conversation following Jesus saying this, like, let's seek truth together. Let's seek reconciliation together. Let's seek understanding, because we are the family of God, in honor of what Jesus has done for us. Then I think the church could begin to lead the way in race relations, instead of constantly kind of really, you know, in my opinion, kind of being the echo of what culture is leading the way. I mean, you see, like, and you know, I think the church can do it better, to be honest with you. I think we have the ability to do it better. I think we should, you know. But these are tough conversations, you know, and we got to get better at having tough conversations, you know. But right now, in a lot of circles, man, we run from tough conversations like the plague, you know. So we gotta, that's fear, right? So we gotta stop that. We gotta get to the root of it, and we gotta do better, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I think we've been pretty long, and had made a couple technical issues and stuff. There's more we could definitely talk about, and I always appreciate having these conversations with you. So anytime, man, we definitely need to together. But I just want to, before we close, if there's anything else you want to say, anything you want to get off your chest, any final thoughts, any takeaways for me or for the listeners, the people watching, anything that you want to say, make sure it gets said before we're done here. What's a final thought takeaway for this?
Yeah, man. Thank you, first of all, for having me on this. This has been such an honor. And I guess, like, I just want to say, I just want to encourage everybody, if you're listening to this, just never be afraid to do the right thing, no matter what the cost. I mean, the message of the Bible is this, that if you do the right thing in honor of God and to pursue him, he will always watch out for you. So speaking up, against injustice that you see, rising up for the minorities, doing what's right, always do that. And I want to encourage you that God has always got you. He will always have you. There's countless of testimonies on that. And also too, if you're listening to this, a lot of the stories that I've told, maybe you think you know what I'm talking about, or you think you know what I'm referring to. I just want you to know right now, first of all, I love everybody. Like there's a lot of passion. I'm a passionate guy, so I shout a lot. Again, that also kind of comes from my Black culture as well. I tend to be very loud. The more passion I get, the louder I get, right? So I just want you to know, like, if there's anything I said, you're like, oh my gosh, feel free to hit me up on Instagram, anything like that. It's TR Chong is my tag, DM me, let me know. But I love everybody, and I want to let you know I'm sending all love out to everybody, but yeah, man. So that's what I got to say. Yeah.
No, all right, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining me. Thank you guys for listening, watching. Join me next week for the next episode of Mixed in America. Hey, thanks for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, can you do 3 things for me? Can you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and tell your friends?